and welcome to the history lessons in Wikipedia world. We are continuing on the complexity of a Roman city in a Roman town. Until now, we've discovered how you would start a new Roman city. We've also seen what elements of public service you would have in a Roman city, but we still haven't seen where people lived, and that is what we're going to do today. We're going to see how the houses were, what they had inside, and how basically ancient Romans lived. So now let's go and see a Roman house. The typical Roman house for one normally wealthy family would be a domus. This is a house. Basic idea. The structure of these houses is mostly the same. There are some structural differences, but all the elements will be there. They will maybe modify its location. For example, this garden here sometimes will be at the other side, but it is just in the intention to adapt to the terrain where it was building. But as I said, every little element would be here. The type of family that would live here would have one head of the family, and then you would have his children and sometimes the wives of his children, as well as obviously his wife and the children. It would be normally big families here. And you would tend to separate quite a lot men's rooms from women's rooms, as we'll see. But let's go bit by bit. We have first the vestibulum. The vestibulum was the main entrance to the whole of this house. Usually it's only seen as bigger structures, but you would have this length going inside. And not all the houses would have spaces porched at the front, but some would. Then, this is just the main entrance here. This is where everyone would come through. Then you would have the atrium. Atrium was one of the most important places in the house. Here's where guests or clients were greeted and were taken into the living rooms or the offices. So it would be very well furnished and well decorated. It would have a square roof on the top with an opening that is called compluvium, in which rainwater would come down, drain inwards, and end up in the impluvium. It's a drain pool, shallow and rectangular, normally lined with marble, and in really wealthy, well-going places there would even be some art inside with tiles. So imagine how rich this could look. It also helped, apart from the draining, it did help regulating temperature. We all know that next to water, temperatures tend to be milder. Might it be cold or might it be warm? That's why people go to the beach and they can bath there. But the impluvium was not to take baths. Then we have the fauces. This is similar to the vestibulum, but it separates the two parts of the house. So now we have the first part where you do have some rooms and accesses to the rest of the house, but this main entrance with the atrium would be centered in gathering people, clients, and being the image of the house. The second part that we'll be talking about now would have more the regular rooms, what you would use on a daily basis. It would be more the family space. So you would have also the tablinum. We're going now to the second part. It's between the atrium and peristyle, this porched cluster-like area that worked as an office for the head of the family would have this tablinum, where you would take the people from outside through the atrium, impress them, and you would have the office. And you could control both sides of the house. So this gave you the authority and the capacity to control what was happening around. Then we have the most usual and daily rooms. We have the triclinium. It's basically the dining room. Let's remember also that Romans didn't eat always on chairs. They had couches. Well-off families would have these enormous couches where you would eat from. Then that doesn't have much of a mystery. The alae are the open rooms at each side of the atrium. Many things and decorations were displayed here. Remember, this first part is the image of the house. The rest, we have the cubiculum, that are the bedrooms. They could be decorated with tiles or just marked out and have one bed placed there. Not really complex. The other thing that we need to have a look is the culina. This was a kitchen. It would be obviously always next to the triclinium and basically used by the slaves to cook the meals. And then one thing that we can't see in this picture would be the posticum. The posticum was a servant's entrance that would be also used by family members that didn't want to be seen leaving the household. Remember that the main entrance in the vestibulum is outside. Everyone sees who goes in, who goes out, and you don't really want to see your slaves going through it because it's reserved for important people, either family or clients. So slaves and working class for the house would be going through the service door. And finally, two other elements. As we've talked about, many houses on the ground floor would have the tabernae, the shops. Might it be restaurants, might it be just regular shops? Here we see what is probably popinae, where you could eat and take everything here. And just finally, most houses, the family area would be all around this porch cluster that we see, and they would have a garden. Might it be inside here, or it could also be an extra garden next to this one. So larger houses could have an extra garden just next to it here. And finally, we don't have the name, but you have this little construction here. At the end of this peristylium, you would always have a place for the house gods. There would be some gods that the family would also would regularly daily worship, and you would have it at the end of the house, and it would be a family only reserved place. So this would be the typical house for a wealthy family in a city. We see some examples here of Pompei. You can see that the impluvium is really shallow, and you would have a drainage taking the water down here, and there would be another drain to make sure it didn't flood. From here you had access to the various rooms, and then you would have the office. And obviously then from here you would still not have access to the rest of the house. You would have to go through it. And these are other examples of Pompei. Here you have the peristylium with the garden. You can see how lovely the porched areas would be. A room, a cubiculum, with a little couch or bed that could be really richly decorated. You see all the frescoes here. And just as a curiosity, this is a triclinium. This is a dining room outside in the garden. Things just continue the same. You wanted to be outside eating in the fresh air. So if you could pay for it, you build a dining room outside. And this little house-like, temple-ish structure would be the place where they would place these little statues of the family gods. It depended on each family and their previous information, tradition, whatever. It would be normally fortune. Sometimes it would be a more known god like Apollo, Minerva, Juno. It depends. Now, these are in the city, a big house. What happens outside the city, in the countryside? Well, we have what is called the villa rusticas. These are farmhouses and great estates that were permanently occupied by servants, and that sometimes these had to go changing, and the main family could reside permanently here or just come once in a while as the family holiday house, or just in certain seasons where the weather was better. So if this estate didn't always have the main owners here, it was always taken care of by sometimes workers, but mainly slaves. And you would have someone in charge that would be overviewing everything. This estate could be enormous. So you have two different parts to it. You would have, well, you've got three, pardon me. You have the pars urbana. The pars urbana is where the owner and his family lived. This would be similar to the domus and could be really lavishly decorated. You would have frescoes, tiled floors sometimes, statues, beautiful gardens. You can see here that just the entrance is already well taken care of. And at the end, you would have the rest of the house, where you would have the dormitories and the quarters for the owners. You can notice the same structures as a domus. The entrance, the vestibulum, is larger, way larger, but here you have the opening where you would have an impluvium. So this would be the wealthy part, the well taken care part, where it would be mostly like this second houses that people can have in the countryside or sometimes in the mountains. So it would be really beautiful, but not that used. It wouldn't be a daily use. Then you would have the pars rustica. Here is where the head of the slaves and the rest of the slaves of the villa worked and lived. This would be here. You can see the mouse. This would be this quarters that could be attached to the main living area or in a different housing. Then you would have also the quarters for the farm animals. In this case, it's at the other side. So you would have distincted and separate parts, obviously not to mingle the owners with the slaves. So you would have the animals at one side, next and close you would have the slaves, because they have to take care of them. And you would also have all the storage rooms, and sometimes you would have even hospitals or a small area for prison in case the extension of the estate was so large and had so much power that it might need it. You would also, what we can see here as a curiosity is also the latrines, carpentry. This is a mill and an oven. These are examples, but you would have all the services that you would need to take care of the animals and to make a profit of the crops that you would be working on this estate. Then you would have what it's called the villa fructaria. This would be the storage rooms where you would put all the products of the farm stored away, ready to transport to the buyers. Storage rooms could be for wine, for grains, for cereal, for fruit, anything. You could also have here some workshops, maybe a bedroom or two, and the offices. Sometimes it would be situated just next to the main domus. So just the basic villa could have so many things. Here, for example, they would be making olive oil, if they had olive trees. This is a blacksmith. Here we can see the dahlias, the big vases buried in the land where you would store normally grains or liquids. So here, this would be a different type of storing place too. And then all around, as you can see on the sides, you would have the fields where the slaves would be working also. And you, depending on the state, you could have a great number of slaves and people working for you. This could be either really small, local economic centers or really large and powerful ones. Some of the best villas even had plumbed bathing facilities that you would normally only find in a city, And even in some cases, there's been found places with central heating. And here I would like to give you an example from Pompei. This is what is called the Villa of Mysteries. When we touch painting, we'll go thoroughly on this one, but just see how well conserved and maintained it is. Yes, there's been lots of restoration here, but you can start identifying all the places that we've just talked about. You'd have the main living quarters here, you'd have space for the slaves, storage areas, and other places to keep animals, for example, or have mills, and the oven here. I can spot an oven. So this is, and you can compare it with a car. This is the main central part of the estate, and the rest would be fields and other storage parts. And just now, finally, quickly, let's go to the Insulae. We've seen the places where wealthy people lived. Now let's go where most of the population would spend their time, apart from at work. These apartment buildings were basically for urban population and more lower class. The DOMUS are for large single families. Here you would have sometimes one family in one room or in a couple of rooms. They could be either decently spaced or just really small places. They had a great variation. Also, it's the start of seeing regular 1 or 2 or even 3-story buildings. It is not that common, that high, but there has been found proof that there was even up to 3-story buildings. These were normally owned by one main owner that rented every single room, as it happens nowadays. The facilities here would not be the best. You would probably have to use chamber pots or the latrines downstairs. You can spot some latrines here. And in the ground floor, here you would normally always have some kind of tabernae shop or business. And it would be usual that their shopkeeper would just live upstairs or even be the owner of the building. During different times in Rome, these buildings were really hazardous, as so many people living in here and made of wood and using fire to cook and to heat yourself, they were quite easy to burn down. So some of the heights of the Insulae were restricted by Augustus to 70 Roman feet, that is around 20 meters. And then they were taken down to 1775 meters after the Great Fire in Rome. And we also know different big fires that Rome has had, and these places just caught like wildfire. So many people, so many things inside to burn. It was dangerous. It's not like nowadays that we don't really cook with fire inside a wooden building. So many people also made that probably you had more chances of someone being careless. But this was one of the main housings for most people in a large city. And you can see in here someone heating himself with fire, and here taking out probably the chamber pot. As an example, we have this ground story Insulae, and even part of the first story in Ostia. So you can have a basic idea of how these houses would be so, and these living spaces would be so close to each other, and in some cases so small. But this, as always, was where most of the people not wealthy enough to buy and build up a domus had to live in a big Roman city. This was the overview of the buildings, main buildings in a Roman city. We've still got entertainment, and look for it in the next lesson. I hope you enjoyed this one, and see you.